When people talk about power, they usually point in one direction, toward Washington, toward the Pentagon, toward aircraft carriers that float like moving cities across the oceans. For decades, America has been seen as untouchable, unstoppable, and unquestionable. But history has a way of humbling even the strongest giants. And sometimes that shock comes from a place the world least expects. Iran is often portrayed as isolated, sanctioned, and cornered, a country under pressure, a nation surrounded by enemies. But what many don't realize is that, time and again, Iran has managed to surprise America in ways that left Washington stunned, speechless, and scrambling for answers. Not with loud speeches, not with empty threats, but with calculated moves that changed the balance of fear. These moments didn't just make headlines, they exposed vulnerabilities, they challenged confidence, and they sent a clear message that power is not only about size or money, but about timing, patience, and resolve. What nobody expected was that a country under constant pressure would repeatedly find ways to push back against the world's strongest military. This is the story of 4 moments when Iran shocked America. 4 times when the global superpower realized that the rules of the game were not as simple as they seemed. The roots of this tension go back decades. Once upon a time, Iran and America were not enemies. In fact, they were allies. The Iranian monarchy was backed by Washington, and American influence ran deep inside Tehran. But everything changed after the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The Shah was gone, and with him, America's foothold in Iran collapsed overnight. What replaced it was distrust, anger, and a sense of betrayal that would shape the future. From that moment on, Iran was no longer a partner. It became a problem. Sanctions followed. Pressure increased. Isolation became policy. And for years, the world believed Iran would eventually bend. But instead of breaking, Iran adapted, quietly, strategically, learning how to survive in a system designed to crush it. While America relied on its visible strength, Iran invested in asymmetric power. Missiles instead of aircraft carriers, proxies instead of direct wars, precision instead of spectacle. And slowly, the gap between perception and reality began to grow. The first shock came in the Persian Gulf during a time when oil was the lifeline of the global economy. In the late 1980s, the Iran-Iraq War had turned the region into a powder keg. Oil tankers were being attacked, insurance costs were exploding, and panic was spreading across markets. To protect shipping lanes, America launched a massive naval operation, escorting tankers and asserting control over the Gulf. But Iran had other plans. Instead of challenging the U.S. Navy head-on, Iran deployed naval mines beneath the water's surface, invisible, silent, deadly. One night, an American guided missile frigate sailed confidently through waters it believed were secure. Then everything changed in seconds. A single mine ripped through the ship's hull, nearly sinking a vessel worth hundreds of millions of dollars. What shocked American commanders wasn't just the damage, it was the realization that a low-cost weapon had nearly destroyed a high-tech warship. The message was brutal and clear. Superiority doesn't matter if you can't see the threat coming. That moment forced the U.S. Navy to rethink how vulnerable it truly was in confined waters. But here's the twist. This was only the beginning. Fast forward to June 2019. Tensions were rising again. Sanctions were tighter than ever. Oil exports were collapsing. The pressure campaign was in full force, and America believed it had total dominance in the skies. That confidence would soon be tested.
An advanced American surveillance drone, one of the most expensive unmanned aircraft ever built, was designed to operate at extreme altitudes beyond the reach of most air defense systems. To Washington, it was untouchable, invisible, safe. Iran saw it differently. Within moments, Iranian air defenses locked on. A missile was launched, and just like that, the drone was gone, destroyed, falling into the sea in flames. The cost? $200 million. The shock? Priceless. What made this moment explosive wasn't just the shoot-down, it was Iran's response afterward. Instead of denying involvement, Iran openly claimed responsibility, publicly, confidently, and dared America to respond.
For a brief moment, the world held its breath. War seemed inevitable. U.S. strikes were reportedly prepared. Then suddenly, they were called off. America stepped back. That silence spoke louder than any missile. It told the world that escalation had limits, and Iran had just tested those limits successfully. But nothing shook the region more than what happened in January 2020. The assassination of General Qasem Soleimani was meant to send a message. He was one of Iran's most powerful military figures, a symbol of influence across the Middle East. His death, carried out by an American drone strike, was supposed to break Iran's confidence. Instead, it ignited something far more dangerous. Iran promised retaliation. Many assumed it would be symbolic, a warning, something indirect. But what nobody expected was a direct missile attack on American forces. In the dead of night, Iranian ballistic missiles streaked across the sky toward U.S. military bases in Iraq. Al-Assad Air Base, one of America's most important regional installations, was hit with pinpoint accuracy. Fuel depots burned, structures collapsed, shockwaves tore through the ground. America initially claimed there were no casualties, but the truth emerged slowly. Dozens of soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries, some collapsed, others lost consciousness. The base was crippled. This was unprecedented. A country had openly fired missiles at American forces and lived to tell the story. No immediate retaliation followed. Once again, the world saw restraint where it expected fury. The balance had shifted. And then came the quiet shock that didn't involve missiles or explosions. Years of sanctions were supposed to isolate Iran completely, cut off its economy, drain its resources, push it into submission. But instead, Iran learned how to operate in the shadows, through regional allies, through influence networks, through strategic patience. From Iraq to Syria, from Lebanon to Yemen, Iranian influence expanded while America struggled to control outcomes. Wars dragged on, governments collapsed, power vacuums formed, and Iran filled them, not with armies, but with strategy. What shocked American policymakers wasn't a single event. It was the realization that despite overwhelming pressure, Iran was still standing, still shaping the region, still resisting. The emotional impact of these moments went far beyond military damage. They challenged America's image. Allies began to question guarantees. Rivals took notes. And within Iran, these events fueled a narrative of resilience and defiance. Families watched their sons return injured. Leaders faced criticism. Confidence wavered. And the idea of absolute dominance began to crack. For Iran, these moments became symbols of survival, proof that resistance was possible. For America, they were reminders that power has limits. And here's the uncomfortable truth. None of these shocks were accidents. They were calculated, patient, carefully timed. Iran didn't seek a full-scale war. It sought recognition of its red lines. The story doesn't end here. History is still unfolding, but these 4 moments changed the conversation forever. They showed that even under pressure, a nation can push back, that even giants can stumble, and that the world is far more unpredictable than it seems.
In the end, power is not just about strength, it's about understanding consequences. And sometimes, the biggest shock is realizing that the opponent you underestimated was never weak to begin with. What do you think? Were these moments acts of defense or signs of something bigger? Let us know your thoughts, and stay tuned because history never stops rewriting itself.